Stop! Ow, stop it! Crypto! Ow! Ow! Stop it! Stop!
Ever since Superman Legacy was announced back in 2022, and the decision was made to effectively cancel the DCEU in favor of rebooting the entire DC Comics cinematic universe as the DCU, us dedicated enthusiasts of the franchise and genre have been really looking forward to the release of the next generation of DC Comics superheroes. Having said that, after a year-long tease, James Gunn's Superman has finally arrived in theaters, featuring a power-packed roster of metahumans with David Corenswet as the brand new Man of Steel. While Henry Cavill's shoes are certainly an endless void to fill, I liked how James Gunn wanted to show a more softer and humane depiction of the character. Even more than Superman, Nicholas Holt's portrayal of Lex Luthor was what kept me hooked. The whole dynamic of Kal-El being consistently sabotaged by reckless techies who just hate the Metropolis hero with the utmost passion is certainly something that works. Having said that, the movie definitely left a few question marks at the end, even if the post-credit scenes were rather ambiguous. So without wasting another moment, let's discuss everything that you might have missed out on in James Gunn's new Superman film. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Why did we not get to see a classic Superman origin story? After the crashing downfall of the DCEU, James Gunn had promised us a younger Clark Kent, who would have had a much more grounded origin story in a world that is nothing but hopeful. So, unlike Zack Snyder's version of the character, this one is not about a brooding god or a reluctant savior, but just a superpowered man trying to save as many lives as possible, be it human, animal, or extraterrestrial being. The new Superman believes everyone deserves to be saved. James Gunn's take is much more focused on Superman balancing his Kryptonian heritage with his human upbringing, rather than it being a blatant display of his powers and abilities as a god on Earth. In fact, in the whole film, nobody calls him a god. Rather, the word alien is seen to be thrown around a lot. Now, ever since the DC Studios and Warner Brothers had released the trailer for David Corenswet's Superman, we all kept asking many questions about James Gunn's choice to make the character so humane and down to earth. In fact, everyone keeps asking why he chose to skip a full retelling of Clark Kent's childhood and first flight, which was a really famous highlight in the previous rendition of the character. We had initially speculated on the reasons behind the film opening several years into his career as a superhero and journalist in Metropolis. Well, there's no need to speculate any further, as it turns out that after the decision left fans baffled, Gunn took to his Threads account and stated that since the audiences already knew the basics, he was more interested in exploring how Clark reconciled his Kryptonian origin with his human upbringing and moral purpose. In fact, that's why at one point in the film, we see him struggling with his identity and purpose, until he realizes the goodness in his heart and bounces back to help save every life he possibly can. Was Batman mentioned in the latest Superman movie? So, many DC enthusiasts have been wondering whether Superman 2025 mentions Batman in any way at all. In fact, until the moment of the film's nationwide release, various fan theories were wheezing off online as they believed that Batman, and more specifically Robert Pattinson's Batman, would appear in a cameo in James Gunn's Superman movie. This particular speculation stemmed from a musical score in the film's soundtrack that sounded coincidentally similar to the theme for the Batman. Now, while Batman does not make an appearance in Superman 2025, a Batman Easter egg does drop in the movie in the form of a road sign that has the words Gotham City written on it. Moreover, according to multiple users on Reddit who have ostensibly seen the film, a shot of the highway sign that mentions Gotham City appears while citizens of Metropolis are being asked to evacuate the city, after Lex Luthor opened a rift between the Earth and the pocket universe he created. The shot apparently appears during the third act of the movie, while a portal rips open, but because everything happened just so quickly, the sign is relatively easy to miss. This Easter egg is rather surprising, since all the early indications had suggested that the movie had no references to Batman at all. So while there's no direct mention of Batman in Superman 2025, there seems to be at least a confirmation that the Dark Knight City definitely exists in Gunn's reboot of the DCU. It also suggests that Metropolis and Gotham City are just close enough to each other that people can drive from one another as part of an evacuation plan. Having said that, while this Easter egg does set up a potential Batman movie that could be integrated with Superman 2025, Gunn has previously made it very clear that there are no plans to fold Pattinson's Batman into the rebooted DCU. Plus, we know that the script for the Batman Part 2, written by Matt Reeves and Mattson Tomlin, has already been submitted, and that movie remains completely disconnected from the new DCU. So by the looks of it all, it will definitely take quite a while before we might see David Corenswet's Superman team up with Batman. although the introduction of the Justice Gang with Hawkgirl, Green Lantern, and Mr. Terrific in the film does make the Dark Knight's inclusion easier down the road. What does the opening text of the film mean? Right as the film begins, the opening crawl of text reads 3 centuries of metas, followed by Superman revealing how metahumans like him have existed in the DCU for over 300 years, thus opening the door for many older characters like Wonder Woman and the Amazons, and perhaps even the Justice Society of America during World War II. The screen then reads 3 decades, which is the opening exposition that confirms how it has been 30 years since Superman landed on Earth as a baby, thus confirming that DCU's new Superman is in his early 30s. The last text that pops up on screen is Gods and Monsters, which just so happens to be the title James Gunn gave this first chapter of DCU projects. What does Supergirl's drunk cameo during the end of the film mean? So the ending of James Gunn's Superman features a rather surprising entrance by none other than Kara Zor-El's Supergirl. However, the cousin of the Man of Steel makes her debut while being extremely drunk. Now, you may not take this so seriously at first glance, but this is actually far more important than some may realize, as it goes far beyond a simple joke about Superman's cousin who apparently just parties all the time. Played by Millie Alcock, Kara Zor-El is set to star in her own Supergirl movie, which is set to release in 2026. While we were already given plenty of hints about her cameo in the film, the fact that Supergirl debuts so drunk surely communicates volumes about where her character is next headed in the DCU. So, in the middle of James Gunn's Superman, Lois Lane asks Superman about his dog Krypto, the unruly alien canine who shares many of the same abilities as the Man of Steel himself, as he also seems to be hailing from Krypton. That's when Clark confirms that looking after Krypto is actually more of a foster situation. Now, for the OG comic book fans who are well versed with the Superman lore, this was definitely a telling allusion to Superman's cousin. Sure enough, Superman's ending sees Millie Alcock's Supergirl arriving to pick up her dog at the Fortress of Solitude, albeit stumbling down in a drunken state. Apparently, Superman had agreed to watch over Krypto while Kara spent time partying on other planets. Anyway, when she decides to leave with Krypto after thanking her cousin, I think James Gunn is trying to tell us that the Superdog will indeed be joining Kara in 2026's Supergirl. Moreover, Superman himself provides the reason behind Supergirl being drunk, explaining to one of his robots that Kryptonians can only get drunk on planets with red suns like Krypton. Basically, a yellow sun like we have on Earth is what gives Kryptonians their extraordinary powers, and compared to that, a red sun negates those powers, giving them the strength and constitution similar to an average human, thus allowing Kara to get absolutely wasted. That being said, the reason why Supergirl is so drunk at the end of Superman is far more interesting. Firstly, you should definitely note that the script for 2026's Supergirl was written by Tom King, the same DC Comics writer who wrote the original limited comic series Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow, which, by the way, was the movie's original title before it was changed. Now, keeping that in mind, it stands to reason that the movie will serve as a pretty close adaptation to the 8-issue series, and to top that off, the beginning of the comics just so happens to open with a drunk Supergirl at a bar, which is located on a planet orbiting a red sun. At the start of this iconic Supergirl series, Kara is effectively at her lowest point, as she seems to be celebrating her 21st birthday while feeling incredibly purposeless and full of pain. During her difficult time, Kara is joined by Krypto, who's doing his best to keep her company while she drinks non-stop. Kara's entire mission was to protect her cousin and keep him safe after Krypton's destruction. However, that whole plan was definitely thrown right into the gutter after she landed on Earth years later than intended, and her baby cousin had already grown up to adulthood and made a name for himself as the world's greatest hero by the time she arrived. As such, Woman of Tomorrow begins with Kara feeling more aimless than ever before, struggling with how she's viewed in comparison to Superman. So, if you tally all of that past grief and trauma, it's more than likely that we'll be seeing the DCU's Supergirl in a very similar position. I think the stage has very much been set for Supergirl to go on her own journey that sees her rising from a true low all by herself. What are these crazy vows that the new Green Lantern keeps mentioning? Right from the beginning of the film, it's been established that the Man of Steel and the Justice Gang have joined forces from time to time, even though Superman is not an official member by choice. Nevertheless, the Justice Gang is ultimately called upon to help Superman take on Lex Luthor by the movie's end, even after Guy initially tried to avoid helping him due to his so-called Green Lantern vows. Despite being just as much of a jerk as he is in the original DC Comics, Guy Gardner still has the ability to overcome great fear. This is a core prerequisite for those recruited to the Green Lantern Corps, which is an intergalactic peacekeeping force founded by the Guardians of Oa. By wielding the green light of willpower, Guy Gardner's particular brand often takes the form of extreme stubbornness. Now, Fillion's version of Gardner looks to be very much the same in the DCU. However, he somehow still earned himself a place on Maxwell Lord's Justice Gang. It's also revealed that the Justice Gang team name was Guy's idea, though Mr. Terrific and Hawkgirl really didn't seem to be on board with it yet. Even then, Guy is just one of a handful of human Green Lanterns we will see, as Kyle Chandler's Hal Jordan and Aaron Pierre's John Stewart will soon debut in next year's Lantern series. Anyway, circling back to the main point, when Superman turns himself in to find out where Lex Luthor is holding Krypto captive, Lois Lane visits the Hall of Justice to get the gang's help. However, Guy refuses to help, citing his vows as a Green Lantern, which allegedly prevent him from getting involved. However, Hawkgirl counters that Guy always invokes his vows whenever there's something he just didn't want to do, and she was absolutely right. Now, if you know the comic lore, you already know that the iconic oath of the Green Lantern Corps is pretty straightforward, as it's used to charge their rings in the comics. Even if we don't hear that vow in the film, Guy does make a half-hearted defense that non-interference in political matters is somehow implied. But regardless of that, he does still get involved by the movie's end by joining Hawkgirl and Barovia to prevent their invasion of Jarhanpur at Superman's request. Clearly, Guy has just been using his oath as a get-out-of-jail-free card, though we hopefully get to hear the actual story sooner rather than later with all the Green Lanterns on the way next year. What is Rick Flag Sr.'s connection to the DCU's first project and the future of the franchise? People who have watched the film already know that Superman features quite a few surprises, which include John Cena's Peacemaker appearing in an interview to talk about Superman after Lex Luthor brands him as a traitor wanting to dominate Earth and its people. Now, this character will soon return in August for Peacemaker Season 2, which will see him face off with Frank Grillo's Rick Flag Sr. For those who don't know, the latter is the father of the original Rick Flag, who was killed by Peacemaker in the old DCEU. Flag was one of the main characters of the animated Creature Commandos, which was the DCU's first project. He returns in Superman as one of the government higher-ups who allows Lex Luthor to take Superman into custody. But in the end, Flag is cautioned about how metahumans make the rules now. Not just that, Peacemaker Season 2 also includes the Justice Gang, so that dynamic should definitely be further explored. Where did the Superman robots come from? So there are multiple Superman robots that serve as caretakers in Superman's Fortress of Solitude, which is hidden underground amongst the frigid zone of Antarctica. These robots mainly exist to help Superman with any medical aid whenever he needs them, help take care of Krypto in his absence, and of course keep the Fortress of Solitude up and running. The film apparently bases all their design and function after being very much inspired by All-Star Superman. Having already voiced multiple animated characters in the DCU's Creature Commando series, it's Alan Tudyk who voices Superman Robot number 4, who's later named Gary at his own request. Is there potential for the villains to return for future Superman films? So, as Gunn had previously teased, everything bad that happens throughout the course of the film is because of Lex Luthor's constant meddling. Finally, Superman's ending ties everything together. It explains the full scope of the villain's plan. Instead of using Superman's actions to carve up Jarhanpur, Lex basically started a war to kill the Man of Steel. He initially brought in the Hammer of Barovia, which was revealed to be Ultraman in disguise. I think, aside from an interdimensional imp, every threat in Superman is connected to Lex Luthor's plan to kill him out of sheer jealousy. He even made Ultraman fake a Barovian accent in order to make it look like the country was retaliating, as Superman stopped Barovia's war with Jarhanpur. Lex actually started the war with the help of the Barovian president, just so that he could take Superman in for questioning and murder him, thus replacing him as the person the world looks up to. Basically, Luthor wanted to be the world's best influencer. However, his plan failed when Krypto helped Superman take down Ultraman, who turned out to be a clone of the Man of Steel that Lex created using a strand of his hair. After quite a showdown, Ultraman seemingly dies after being sucked into a black hole, and as it seems, his death takes place in the pocket universe Lex Luthor created. That plays a huge role in Superman, with the final threat of the movie being an interdimensional rift that almost destroys Metropolis as it breaks the ground apart. Even if Mr. Terrific managed to close the rift, a lot of damage still remained, as Superman's post-credit scene evidenced via a crooked building. Moreover, Lex Luthor did not have a problem letting Metropolis be destroyed if it meant killing Superman. But eventually, he ends up having to pay for his crimes. After the crew at the Daily Planet and Eve Tessmacher, Lex's latest ex-girlfriend, collaborate to reveal the truth of his plans to the entire world. In the background of the selfies that Eve had sent to Jimmy Olsen were actually maps, contracts, and more details about Lex Luthor's plans. So the Daily Planet shines a light on Lex's illegal moves, and the villain is taken into police custody. He's then sent to Belle Reve, an important prison in DC Comics that has already made its DCU debut before Superman. For those who don't know, Belle Reve is the prison where Viola Davis and Amanda Waller recruited the Creature Commandos from the HBO Max animated series. Anyway, while Lex Luthor might have been sent to prison at the end of Superman, it's unlikely he'll remain there. He might not have won this time, but the film shows just how intelligent and resourceful Luthor is. This makes him someone who could end up connected to Amanda Waller's covert team. Apart from that, Superman revealed that Lex Luthor transformed Angela Spica into the Engineer by infusing her DNA with nanites. But with Lex sent to prison at the end of the movie, the Engineer looks rather aimless. However, that won't be the case, as one of the first projects announced for the DCU's Chapter 1 was a movie for the Authority. This team is basically made of morally questionable characters who unite to protect the world by any means necessary. As such, the Authority gets its hands bloodier than the likes of the Justice League. So based on how the Engineer let Lex transform her to get the power to keep metahumans in check, she would fit right in. As for Ultraman, I think he's probably alive. I mean, what if the black hole sucked him into the Bizarro world? That's just my personal theory, because he could possibly return in a sequel or a Bizarro film or show. Why does Superman post-credit scene fail to set up any future projects? So, in an exclusive interview, James Gunn explained his reasoning behind choosing credit scenes that don't directly set up future DCU projects. Having previously directed Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy trilogy, Gunn reflected on his past experience with post-credit scenes and said that some of the most memorable ones were actually the silliest, like the Howard the Duck cameo at the end of Guardians and Stan Lee's appearance in Guardians Volume 2. He also admitted that both he and Marvel had at times used post-credit scenes to tease ideas that never ended up paying off. So unless there's certainty about a future project being made, such as the already confirmed Supergirl movie, he wouldn't feel comfortable teasing it in a credit scene. He also emphasized that he didn't want to include post-credits moments purely for shock value, if there were no real plans to follow through. That said, Gunn expressed that he still enjoys giving audiences a fun moment for staying through the credits, not only as a token of appreciation, but also to honor the efforts of the cast and crew. That's why he chose to include a scene with Mr. Terrific at the end of Superman, not to set up a huge future plotline, but to offer a little reward to those who stuck around. Moreover, audience fatigue over these unfulfilled teases seems to be growing, and Gunn appears to be aware of that. He seems intent on approaching the DCU differently, by only including scenes that serve a purpose or are guaranteed to matter later, and honestly, for a rebooted universe like DCU, this strategy makes a lot of sense. While it might be disappointing for some that Superman doesn't use its credit scenes to introduce big new characters or spell out the future of the DCU, the film does lay some groundwork. Supergirl is introduced toward the end of the movie, and the Gods and Monsters storyline, which ties into the title of the first chapter of the DCU, is hinted at right from the opening sequence. Anyways, that was all we could think of in terms of burning questions that might be rattling around in your head. Having said that, what do you guys think about the DCU reboot? Let us know in the comments down below.